we live in a much better world because employees can also innovate.
Right.
And you don't have to quit your job to introduce an innovation that can change the world.
When we think about entrepreneurs, we think about those that are paving the way. But when you look at the 30 most transformative innovations in the past 30 years, 70% of those have actually been created by employees within organizations. Hi, I'm Joshua Carlson, co-founder of Propelo Media, and today I sit down with Kaihan Krippendorff. He's the founder and CEO of Outthinker, and they've worked with some of the biggest brands from Google, Panasonic, Sotheby's, Marriott, just to name a few. Today he's going to be talking about a number of things, which include why marketing within your organization is just as important as marketing externally. He's also going to talk about how you can look for patterns from other organizations that are disrupting the status quo, and then how you can apply those to your own company. And finally, he's also going to talk about how you can change the world without quitting your day job. Now let's hear what Kaihan has to say. Kaihan, welcome to Ask an Expert. I appreciate having you on today.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
All right, so I want to jump right in. You've talked about the fourth option. I'd like for you to just share what that is to the viewers.
Yeah, so the fourth option is sort of a metaphor, and it says there's a point where you and your competitors stop thinking, right? And that's represented by 3. They start repeating themselves, and they'll say something, I've been in this industry for 20 years. This is the way you do it, 1, 2, 3. And if we look at the path of great companies, they're often founded on turning their back on those 3 things and doing the fourth option, whether that is, let's say Walmart and Sam Walton deciding to build stores in rural areas rather than cities, or whether that is Southwest Airlines deciding to go back to the point-to-point system while everyone was building hubs and spokes.
Right.
That pattern of thinking where you recognize my competitors have stopped thinking and they might be doing the right thing, but they've stopped looking for a better thing. That gives me an opportunity to see a fourth option.
Okay, so it's kind of basically, I think a lot of businesses fall into this complacency, right? I mean, it's like things are going well, but they could be done better. So the question I have is, how do we mentally get out of this complacency, and how do we actually start to think about what that fourth option could even be?
Well, I think it's easier to think about thinking in a different box than thinking outside of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this sounds sort of loose there, but what you do is you take a pattern from another industry and you apply it to your industry.
Okay.
And there are certain patterns. I believe there are 36 different patterns. For example, one pattern is don't control something, coordinate it.
Okay.
So that could be the platform models like Uber and Airbnb. And then you could say, well, how do I apply that pattern in my industry? I'm in the nursing industry. Could I coordinate nurses? I'm in the publishing industry. Could I coordinate writers, for example, right? But that's just one. Another one is go back to what was been used. If we go back to Southwest Airlines, they embraced what others had abandoned. They embraced the hub and the point-to-point model.
Mm-hmm.
So you can ask in your industry, what has been something that others have abandoned? And what if we went back and got that? That's what gave us BlackBerry originally. They embraced the old text network that was being abandoned. So there are these patterns. You just take that pattern and you apply it to your industry and ask a question, and the ideas just start popping up.
So I think that that's very interesting, especially right now, because I think a lot of businesses are looking at, hey, how do we do things differently now? Because there's different marketplaces, there's different consumer demand. How do we avoid picking the wrong pattern? Is there some process you can go through to be able to validate a direction that you're looking at?
I think that worrying about picking the wrong pattern is the wrong focus. What we should do is we should use any pattern, generate ideas, and then worry about picking the wrong ideas.
Okay.
And sort of you want to separate conception from consideration and really be free to conceive of lots of things we could do with whatever patterns, and then sort those ideas, identify which are the ones that you want to move forward with.
So it sounds like best practice is not to just say, okay, hey, I like what Southwest is doing where they're point to point, but rather pick a number of different things that you're seeing, go down the path of each one of those, and then look at what, kind of spawned out of those to choose what's going to be the best.
Right. So if we took the Southwest pattern, the Southwest pattern is embrace what others have abandoned, right? And that's the BlackBerry pattern. And that is, there are lots of examples of it. So let's just abstract that pattern. And then you could say, let's come brainstorm things that our competitors have abandoned. Old concepts, old technologies, old approaches, old assets, old customers. Come up with a big list and say, what if we adopted all these things? Now you've got 10 or 15 ideas, right? Now you could forget where those ideas came from. You could, layer other patterns and come up with more ideas, but end up with 40 or 50 or 150 ideas, and then sort through them and pick the ones that you think have the highest chance of helping you achieve your goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So once you do go down this path and you've got this kind of, new direction, big question for me is, how do we get everybody in an organization to buy into this? Because, we have been going down this path for so long. This is routine. Now we've got something new. Now we need buy-in to make sure that, everybody's on board.
And this is a big barrier, right? It's not really an execution barrier as much as it is a communication barrier, because if you had full control over it, you're the CEO, you can just execute it, right? Come up with a work plan and just have people do it. But you want to enroll all of your employees, your investors, your board members, your partners, right? So that they all understand where we're going. So there's several tools, but I think 3 things to think about. One is really simplify. Don't come up with 7 things. Try to break it down to 3 things in an overall theme. Like I think of Best Buy, when it engineered a strategy that allowed it to survive and actually start winning against Amazon. It came up with a strategy that it called Renew Blue. And what Renew Blue means is the people with the blue shirts, they're the people in the stores. That's the one thing that we have that Amazon doesn't have. So our whole strategy is going to be about leveraging those people as our unique differentiator. Right? So first thing is simplify. 55% of mid-level managers can't name even 2 of their company's top strategic priorities. So there's a big gap there. And then the last 2 things I would say is do the work to come up with a communication strategy. So identify who are the key stakeholders that I need on board. Come up with a list of 3 to 5. That could be, certain type of employee, certain type of partner, investors. And then the last thing I like to do is for each of those, I like to apply a framework I call the GAME framework. GAME is goal, audience, message, engagement. And you being a marketer, you probably use a similar approach, which is kind of thinking about my stakeholder almost as if I were marketing a product. What is my goal for that stakeholder? I want employees to follow the direction. I want investors to invest. Right? Different goals. What do I know about the audience? What are they telling themselves? What's their internal dialogue? What are the 3 message points that would have them, given the audience, do what I want them to do? And then finally, this engagement is thinking creatively about how to engage them, not just a town hall or a report, but something kinesthetic, maybe get them outside of the office, something symbolic, like Samsung many years ago, it produced really terrible equipment, and they said, we're going to reinvent ourselves. So what they did was they did this symbolic bonfire where they took all of their inventory and just burned it. And it created this sense of, there's a new Samsung emerging. Right? So those are 3 things: simplify, do the stakeholder analysis, apply the GAME framework.
So it almost sounds like, the process that you would do to go out into the marketplace to educate, potential consumers, you're doing that internally. So it's a dual process, and it just starts first internally.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And it's a marketing communication strategy that starts internally. And especially if you're in a service business, the way that your customers know what your product or service is often through your people. Right. So you need to get the adoption internally first before you start getting externally.
I love that, because I think a lot of organizations miss the fact that virtually every single person in their organization is somehow connected to the consumer. Now, they may not
talk to the consumer, they may not chat the consumer, but they work on the product. They're part of the process, and getting that buy-in will produce a better service or a better product, which ultimately makes marketing and sales so much easier
Yes.
because everybody's in alignment. But that's just, unfortunately, that's just missed too often.
Yes, yes, I agree. I think that marketing, I think we think too myopically about marketing, about just being communication.
Right.
But I really think marketers should command the whole business model. You could use Alex Osterwalder's business model canvas if you'd like.
Okay.
I've used this framework. It's 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 going to sound simple, it's going to sound a little goofy because it's 8 Ps, but it's a great checklist. So you take product, price, place, promotion, the marketing 4
Yep.
Ps.
Right.
But that don't stop there. You've got positioning, which is your brand.
Mm-hmm.
You've got physical experience, which is the whole customer journey. You've got processes, which is your operations, and supporting all of that. You've got people, who you hire, what your values are, what the norms of behavior are. And really, when all of those are working in concert, then you can create a distinctive and deliver a distinctive value proposition.
Love it. I love it. 4 Ps takes me back to college, but eight Ps makes a bigger difference. So you've talked about changing the world without quitting your job. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, my wife is an executive at MasterCard, and many of my friends are entrepreneurs. And there's often this sense that from entrepreneurs that, hey, to innovate, you got to be an entrepreneur. And those people that are working in the big corporate jobs in their towers, like maybe they take our innovations, acquire them, and they scale them, but they're not the innovators, right? But my wife is extremely creative and smart and cares, right? So anyway, long story short, I looked at the 30 most transformative innovations over the last 30 years, like the internet, email, DNA sequencing, MRIs, the big ones. And I went back and researched who came up with the idea. Was it an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was that actually only 30% of those were conceived of by entrepreneurs, 70% by employees. So the overall conclusion is we live in a much better world because employees can also innovate.
Right.
And you don't have to quit your job to introduce an innovation that can change the world. And so that's what my work has been the last 5 years.
And so it's great. And I love the data behind it, right? Because I think that there is this, there's this bias to think that, you do have to go out, right? You've got to drop out of college and I got to go, work in the garage.
Yes.
How do you, because I think that perception is very prevalent. How do you, two questions. One, I'm an employee, right? And I'm in an organization and maybe it's not creative. So how do I like start to do that? And then the flip side of that is, hey, I'm a manager and I just heard that tidbit. How do I empower my employees to start thinking differently from that standpoint?
Yeah. Well, I think a first starting point is to recognize that it is difficult.
Yeah.
But if you've been an entrepreneur, that's difficult too.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, they're both a long journey to innovate and change the world, right? Because Machiavelli wrote, there's nothing more difficult to take in hand than the introduction of a new order of things, because the innovator has for enemies all those who have done well under the old, and lukewarm defenders and those who may do well under the new, right? Introducing something new always confronts, this is the way we've done things, this won't work, you don't have the data. So either way, it's a challenge. I think that's the first thing, is to acknowledge that it's difficult, but it's also difficult being an entrepreneur.
Sure.
And then what I did was I interviewed 150 internal innovators, and I asked them what were the big barriers. They're like, and seven big barriers came out. I won't go through all 7 of them here, but I'd point out 3 that are maybe the most important.
Okay.
The first is, going back to our point earlier, most people don't understand the strategy. So understanding the need of the company and not innovating just because you think that the market wants it, which is kind of what an entrepreneur gets to do. Hey, market wants something, let's build it.
Yeah.
You have this second customer. That customer is your company, and you want to have the customer insight to understand what they would support. Right. The next big one I see is, I call it value blockers, but you can think of a business model. And so using a Alex Osterwalder type business model canvas to think about, there is a natural business model around what I'm building, but maybe the way I want to price it is in conflict with the way that we currently price.
Right.
Or maybe the kind of people that I want to run it aren't the kind of people in my company. And so you go back and just re-engineer the business model a little bit so that it doesn't get that organ rejection that often we experience. Right?
Okay.
And the last thing, I think it goes back to the game framework, I guess, is view the political challenge as part of the problem-solving process. That is one of the big distinguishers between people who are successful at it. It's not only, I had this mousetrap and there's something wrong with my company that they don't recognize the beauty of my mousetrap, right?
Right.
It is, I have this mousetrap and I not only know how to work the politics, but I actually enjoy that part of the challenge, the internal marketing challenge, to put together the right stakeholders in the right sequence so that it's adopted. And often it's adopted. I think Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, has a phrase that's something like, great leaders, they do it, and then the people said they did it themselves. There's a little of like making it other people's ideas and finding the internal advocates to get it through. So those are three things for the internal innovator. And for the manager, just look at the opposite side of that. How do I get people to understand my strategy? How do I train people to design business models? How do I build political acumen and provide political cover for my innovators?
Okay, well, I love that. It reminds me of a lesson that I gave to my kids early on, which was study your teacher as much as your subject, because that political aspect of it will, it greases the wheels and it makes it easier for you as opposed to being resistant. So especially depending on the subject matter, some are harder than not. So having the teacher as an ally or having a manager as an ally it's priceless, really. So that's fantastic insight. So what are areas that you are seeing right now in the marketplace that are doing well, or there's a direction that you're seeing that's something that companies should be looking towards as they say, hey, we're struggling, but who else out there is doing well that maybe we can pick something from?
Well, certainly, like, you start on a base of the health of your business and the industry, right? So I did this analysis of 50 different industry or sectors and looked at which ones are really profitable, which ones have high balance sheets, and if you have high margins and you've got a strong balance sheet, this is an opportunity for you to leave the competition behind and leapfrog ahead.
Right.
If you have neither of those, as most retailers are low margin and poor balance sheets, and hospitality, and we're seeing the fallout there. So the first thing I think to do is to really shore up your finances and get as lean as possible, and be smart in how you deploy capital. And then I looked at of these 36 patterns, which are ones that might be particularly helpful here. And there were 4 or 5, but I think one that is I think there are two that I think would be particularly powerful to apply would be. There's an ancient Chinese phrase which is loot a burning house. And what it means is when people are running away from the fire of a burning house, some people are running away because of actual danger, but a lot of people are running away just because of the social momentum. They're just doing what everyone else is doing, right?
Yeah.
So they're not really running away from danger. They're running away to run away with the pack.
Yeah.
And so what Warren Buffett would do is he'd go and look and rationally see which areas are really burning and which ones are people just running away because other people are running away. And then the second pattern I think is really powerful to think about, especially in this era where we really need to work together to come through, is to ask, who else benefits if I win? And instead of thinking within your industry about who you could partner with, imagine a future in which you have come out of this and you are thriving, and look around, who else is benefiting, right? Maybe the town is benefiting. Maybe my neighbors are benefiting, certainly my suppliers, right? Or maybe there are other products that my customers buy when they buy my product. Like I sell I do plumbing, and they also buy whatever, plumbing pieces. It's a bad example,
Sure.
but you know what I mean. But you
Yeah.
step forward into that and look around, and then you'll see new partnering opportunities.
I
You
like
know.
that. So, and that's, I guess, that's something that we need to do more of, because I think that there are alignment opportunities out there that we just, again, so much of this is kind of, it's ostrich head in the sand kind of thing. It's just going to pass, and it's not. This isn't passing. This is here. So, we need to break away and break the mental paradigm. What do you think is the number one thing that businesses are doing wrong right now, and they don't necessarily know it?
I think that they're missing the opportunity to imagine a truly virtual world and
Mm,
design their business now as if it was already there. I mean, banks know that they don't want to have, what are they called? Locations.
sure,
I can't even remember the name of that because it's been so long since I've been
like
in there,
tellers,
right?
basically, right?
Yeah, right. It's inexpensive. People don't, for the few exceptions, people don't, need them. So, but that is something that they've been thinking about for a long time, and they're viewing this as an opportunity now to pull back their branches. That's the
Yeah,
word, pull back their
branches. Yeah,
branches. And so, COVID is accelerating a lot of trends that were already underway: digital trends, virtual trends,
yeah,
working from home, et cetera. And so, I think it's really a powerful thing. Like great chess players, they envision checkmate and move backward from checkmate,
right.
right? I'm not a good chess player, so I just try to get the pawns closer to you and to hope I'm going to get you into checkmate. But
Sure.
think like a great chess player and say, what if checkmate looked like no physical interaction in my
Yeah.
business? How could I deliver my value proposition and work with my employees and interact with my customers and partners in that way? And what could I do to move there early now? You know?
Sure,
Um,
that's fantastic. And actually, we have a partner of ours, content specialist, and she's working with a client. And as you talk about banks and wanting to get away from branches, this business is literally virtual banking, right? Like that is 100% their model. And
mm,
so, fortunately for them, they were well positioned before this. But I think another thing that you touched on that I'm hearing from a lot of guests that we have on, which is COVID's not inventing things. It's just accelerating directions that were already
yes.
happening. And
Yes.
that's a very interesting kind of paradigm shift to think about. I'd like to just branch out and talk about video. So you and
Mm-hmm.
I are on video right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that people were doing before, but obviously COVID accelerated video. Right, video was this emerging trend. So much of it, though, has been inner company. Right, it's been I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to the colleague that used to sit next to me, and now we're doing it from afar. What are things that you are seeing, or maybe just thinking, how should companies be looking at leveraging video to interact with consumers moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good. I'm going to try to get a little more specific on that, but there's a great book I read by a professor at Harvard called, his name's Bharat Anand. His book's called The Content Trap.
Okay.
He writes about this theory of the content trap. Then he launches HBX, which is Harvard's online MBA. I think it's changed to a different name. He did such a great job though there that now he manages all of Harvard's online for all the schools
Mm,
learning, and he did this before COVID. So his big insight in looking at this is when we try to move online, we still are stuck in the old paradigm of this is about taking content and delivering content.
right.
We're stuck in the content trap.
Okay.
But the models that work well virtually are often not hub to spoke communication, but spoke to spoke communication,
Right.
right? Like Craigslist, for
Yeah.
example. It's kind of like a platform, but I, I like not calling it a platform because it kind of frees up your conception of it. So I think a lot of people are just trying to translate the physical to the digital, not unlike, the first automobiles looked a lot like carriages,
Right.
right? So I think that we're still in that stage. I think it is a good idea to think about, if I were to design this from scratch, what would I enable? Probably more consumer to consumer connections than company to consumer connections, as an example. And I think there's also a chunking down of your product into smaller increments, because when you're delivering more of it digitally, you don't have to ship it all at once. You can ship it as you go. And same thing that we saw as software move from software to licenses to software as a service, it starts becoming an ongoing delivery. I heard the CEO of Haier, the Chinese conglomerate, or not conglomerate, but big appliance company that bought GE appliances. And he was talking about, in the future, maybe they won't buy a washing machine, but they'll buy clean clothes. And so the business model starts becoming that. So somewhere in that space is an opportunity for us to redesign how we interact with consumers using video, and not thinking of it as just trying to translate what we had before into something that video makes possible.
I like that.
At least when I'm doing video, yeah. So I'm just trying to do, I'm personally trying to do a lot of more interactive. I'm using this tool called Mentimeter, which is a kind of a polling tool, very dynamic. I did this for like 500 public teachers and did this word cloud live, and it's a free tool. And there are these other tools popping up that are just really allow to, aspire to make the video experience even better than the real life experience.
Well, I like the takeaway that, just basically it's a new channel, so don't use it the way that you used a different channel, right? You should be thinking about it completely differently, because it is something that is different. And if you stay in that, old method, then you're missing an opportunity to really leverage its full potential. That's profound. I really like that. Got a question. You've kind of touched on this, but I'll just ask it point blank, and you can respond to it. But is it better to chase the market or to chase your vision?
Interesting. I think that you really want to spend the time to do the work to try to find the overlap, right? There's nothing more dangerous than an idea when it's only one you have. Emile Chartier, this French philosopher, said. And so what I find is, like, the internal innovators, what I find is the ones that get frustrated, they got one idea and they want to pursue it, but it doesn't overlap with their vision and doesn't overlap with the company's purpose if there's a market opportunity. But you do the work, come up with 100 ideas, and come up with 100 ideas, and don't stop until you have 100 ideas, and then take the market, my vision and passion, and what the company wants, or what our strengths and capabilities are, and plot it, and then circle in on the ones that are right there in the middle. And then I guess if you really don't have anything that overlaps all three, that's a personal choice. You make money, or do you want to live your passion? I have always chose to live my passion. And honestly, to be completely authentic, I wish in my earlier stages of life, I had gone after the money rather than my passion, and then did my passion, but that was my choice. But it's a personal choice. There's no right or wrong, right?
Yeah, no, that's good feedback. You're a speaker. So you've given a lot of speeches, a lot of different places. That's not happening right now. So I'm curious what you are seeing is happening right now, and what you see potentially could be evolving from this.
Yeah. I think it goes back a little bit to our video and how people use that. I think that people were on the fence for a while, wondering when events were going to come back. I was getting stuff pushed back to September, October. Yeah. Now I'm getting that stuff pushed back to February, March. And the big uncertainty is, what kind of medical progress will we have? Because I think that we've realized that we're not going to be able to open up and really contain this. Because even in countries where they've gotten it down to almost zero when they opened up, I was talking to a colleague of mine in Germany, and they're talking about maybe they need to shut down again, even in Germany, which handle it pretty well. So, I think that what people are now recognizing is we're going to have to find a way to deliver the value proposition of events in different ways. And that value proposition may be, how do I sell a bunch of software to my developer base? How do I entertain or bring valuable content to my membership base if I'm an association, right? So
Yeah.
think about what the value proposition of events are. And I think we can deliver a lot of it virtually, but it doesn't have to be one big event. It can now be not drip, but in smaller chunks as needed. We ran 2 summits, and we raised $160,000 for charity. We
Wow.
kind of had the who's who of thought leaders, from Renee Maubourn of Blue Ocean Strategy to Rita McGrath. We had Dan Pink. We had Marshall Goldsmith. We had just like the who's who, because they were all available.
Sure.
And we built so much momentum that now we're going to bring it into what comes next. And I've been inspired by a lot of Scott Galloway's stuff, and I love his podcast. And what he talks about is, he really thinks that this is going to be the moment of truth for a lot of educational institutions. And we're going to see a lot of them go away, and people aren't going to pay $40,000 to pay for a year when it's all online. So anyway, long way of saying is that I think that events are going to find a different avenue to achieve their goals, and it's going to look very different than a bunch of people in a room, at least for the next year.
Sure. I want to get back to this, but I have a pre-question, because 2 spawned out of this. One is, so congratulations, that's fantastic that you guys were able to raise so much money. How did you actually promote that? How did you get that out there to get the people to it?
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's a little bit of the influencer strategy, right?
Okay.
What's the book? There's a great book by a Harvard professor who studies media. Basically, she says, like, the way to make a great movie is obviously get Matt Damon and get, whoever else, and get their audiences together and make them your audience. So we really had people with a great audience. And so we could, get those people. But it was just a lot of, I was up at 3 a.m. emailing business school alumni clubs, partnering with them, give you, give this at a discount for your people. We lined up a whole bunch of affiliate partners, given the purpose was really, for good. It was easier to get that, but it was a lot of work to get the audience. We got about 5,000 people to sign up.
But the takeaway here is that you focused on, the 5 Matt Damons that you wanted. And that helps get you, that's your 10X factor. That's your ability to scale up. Okay. So I want to get back to, I'm glad you brought it up, because this is a question I've been thinking of. And I wanted to be diplomatic about it. You're very well educated. So Columbia, Wharton, I graduated school, got business degree. So I want to put that out there right first. But the question was going to be, what I've come to find is I've learned so much post-education, right? I've learned from, peers definitely early on in my career. But notably, in the past several years, it's been through podcasts for me, a lot of those, or it's been books, like by authors such as you. You've got a great book, Outthink Your Competition. So the question is, do I spend $100,000 on an education, or do I spend $1,000 on good books and content?
Yeah, I think it all depends on what the value of that piece of paper and those 3 letters at the back of your name are going to be, and I think once employers say, you know what, I'm going to accept the 50 microcredits you got for listening to those podcasts, and I'm going to value that as much as the piece of paper that has a university name on it, and I'll count that as, your credibility to give you that next role.
Sure.
And I do think it's going that way. I think that the microcrediting and the democratization of accreditation, where it's no longer will be monopolized necessarily by old institutions with big buildings, right?
Right.
I think that so if your goal is career, then that's what's going to take. If your goal is just learning, I agree with you 100%. I've learned more after school than I did before. you know, doing these summits. We had 55 speakers or something. We did one that was 24 hours, and I was at every single one, and my brain was just like full.
Right.
So I think there's so many opportunities to educate yourself through podcasts.
Well, so it's interesting how you responded there, which is basically, you know, that piece of paper, it opens a door, right? And so, but the reality is you can learn anywhere, and you can expand and grow and develop in any medium, and you should continue, because just like you and I are doing, like we continue to learn to this day.
Yeah, but what's missing, I think, is the barrier to entry. You know, Michael Porter's
Yeah.
theory of like, if there's a barrier to entry, then you can charge more.
Mm.
The barrier to entry, one reason that doctors, they don't earn as much as they should, many, but they should earn more. And one reason is because it's hard to become a doctor.
Yeah.
You have to get licensed to become a lawyer, right? So you have fewer people claiming to be doctors and lawyers.
Right.
So I think there has to be some barrier to entry that says, you can't just say that I listened to this podcast. You know, you got to say, I went through a level of effort that other people aren't willing to go through,
Right.
and therefore I can charge more for having done that. You know.
Yeah, good insight. Okay, so I'd like to wrap with this one, which is, if you can go back in time, and you actually spoke to this, you know, you wish you were a little bit more money centric at the beginning,
Uh-huh.
but outside of that, like, what would you tell younger you know, having the wisdom and having, you know, the experiences that you have now? Is there something that you might have approached differently, you know, early on in your career?
Oh my God, so much, so much. But I think, like, if I were to summarize it, I would say, you know, now, you know, I wrote my first book like 18 years ago or something, and I'm all about strategy and thinking about the future. But honestly, the way I have lived my life has not been about thinking about the future.
Mm,
Going for 2 stickers tomorrow rather than 1 sticker today. I would really like have spent more time when I was in high school talking to people in college and thinking about college and planning out my college, and then when in
sure.
college talking about, you know, what comes next, and really thinking about my plans 3 years, 5 years out. Now my plans may completely change, your vision may change, but um, you only have so many years left, you know, 4 years on this earth, and, you know,
Right.
make the most of them. That comes, I think, from thinking ahead.
Well, I like that, and I'll just piggyback to say, you know, we started this podcast about 3 months ago, and the people that I've talked to, just like you, in
Mm,
this limited amount of time, it's just been incredibly rewarding. And
mhm.
so, you know, I do recall there's an agency here in Portland, Wyden and Kennedy, and I had been encouraged while in college to go ask agencies, like, just go sit down, have a cup of coffee with them.
Yeah, right,
And the
right.
insights that I gained from that were really valuable. But it's that practice and that technique I stopped right when I started my career. And don't get me wrong, I did a little networking here and there, but really proactively looking for advice and, you know, talking to other people
Yeah.
to get different perspectives, to think about the future differently. You know, really was reborn with this podcast, because it's just
Mm,
it's priceless, right? And there's a lot of people
yeah.
willing to have those conversations with you, that
Yeah.
can help along that journey.
Yeah, and it's great that you're doing this for yourself and also for everyone else, so that we can all
Exactly.
be with you on that and get the benefit of hearing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really great work.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Got a lot of insightful information, so I'm very much looking forward to getting this aired, and appreciate your time. And I look forward to having you back on in the future.
You know, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for doing the work that you do.
All right. Thank you very much.